I saw something moving in the cemetery by the woods, and I wish I hadn't. I live in a small rural town where people still believe in old superstitions. Most folks here don't go wandering after midnight, especially near the woods that border our local cemetery. I always thought those were just stories, meant to scare kids or keep them away from trouble. But last fall, I found out there might be something more to it. It was late October, just a few nights before Halloween. I had stayed out with some friends longer than I should have, and by the time I started walking home, the fog had rolled in thick and heavy. The fastest way back to my house was to cut past the cemetery that sits right at the edge of the woods. I'd done it before in daylight. It's not a huge place, just a scatter of old tombstones, some leaning and cracked, others swallowed by weeds. At night, though, it looks endless. The iron gate creaked when I pushed it open, and I almost turned back right then. But the thought of walking the long way around made me grit my teeth and keep moving. The mist wrapped around the graves like white smoke, and every sound, my footsteps, the rustle of leaves, echoed louder than it should have. About halfway through, I felt it. The silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore, it was watching. At first, I thought it was just my nerves. But then I saw movement. Something shifted between the headstones up ahead. Not a person, too tall, too thin. Its outline was jagged, like its body didn't know what shape it wanted to be. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The thing moved again, bending low and then rising up until it towered above the grave markers. It had long, crooked limbs that stretched too far, and its head tilted unnaturally to the side, as though bones were cracking under its skin. I couldn't make out a face, just hollow darkness where its features should have been. And it wasn't alone. From the corner of my eye, I saw two more figures crawl out of the fog. They slithered between graves, dragging themselves across the dirt. Their movements were jerky, like marionettes with tangled strings. When they opened their mouths, I expected to hear screams, but instead came a low hum, a vibration that made my teeth ache. I should have run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The tallest one turned toward me, and I swear the fog seemed to bend with it. I could feel the weight of its gaze, though it had no eyes. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I was certain I wasn't going to make it out alive. That's when I remembered something my grandmother used to say: if the dead come looking, don't let them hear your name. She believed that spirits, or whatever they were, needed to know who you were to follow you home. Desperate, I clamped my hands over my mouth, biting down hard to stop myself from making a sound. The creatures moved closer, their limbs scraping the ground, their hum growing louder. I backed away, slow and shaking, until I reached the gate. The moment I stepped through it, everything stopped. The humming cut off, the figures melted back into the fog, and the silence returned as if nothing had ever been there. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my room, shaking, staring at the window, half expecting to see that crooked head peering in. The next morning, I went back with daylight on my side. The cemetery looked normal again, just old stones and weeds. But near where I'd seen them, the grass was pressed flat, as though something heavy had been crawling there. I haven't taken that shortcut again. And sometimes, late at night, when the fog is thick, I swear I hear that humming drifting in from the woods. The cemetery creatures didn't forget me. After that night in the cemetery, I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, or a trick of the fog. Maybe exhaustion, maybe my imagination. But the memory clung to me like wet clothes. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that crooked head tilting, those inhuman limbs shifting in the mist. Days passed, then weeks. I thought the fear would fade. Instead, it spread. I couldn't pass the cemetery gate without feeling that crushing silence pressing against my skull again. I stopped walking that way entirely, even during the day. But the thing that unsettled me most wasn't the memory. It was the sound. That low, vibrating hum. I began hearing it at home, faint at first, late at night when the world was still. It would creep through my walls, settle into my chest, and rattle my teeth. At first, I thought it was something in the house, the old pipes, maybe. But no matter how many times I checked, there was nothing. I didn't tell anyone right away. What could I even say? Hey, I think something followed me from the cemetery. It hums when it wants me to know it's close. But then my grandmother noticed. One evening, she found me sitting in the kitchen with all the lights on, staring at nothing. She didn't laugh when I told her. She didn't call me crazy. Instead, her face went pale, and she crossed herself. You shouldn't have gone through there at night, she whispered. Not when the fog comes. She told me something I'd never heard before. According to her, the cemetery wasn't just a resting place. The woods beyond it were older than the town itself, and people used to say they belonged to those who never moved on. Not ghosts exactly, not demons either. She called them hollow ones. Beings that fed on memory, on names, on the thread that ties a person to the living. They can't take you unless they know you, she said. That's why I always told you, don't let them hear your name. Her warning chilled me, because I hadn't spoken that night. I'd kept silent, like she'd taught me. But still, I couldn't shake the sense that they knew me anyway. The visit. A month later, it happened again. I woke at 3:14 a.m., the exact time every night for the past week. My room was icy cold, my breath visible in the dark. And the humming was louder now, so close it felt like it was inside my skull. This time, I saw something. At the edge of my bed, a shadow leaned forward. Too tall for my ceiling, its body bent unnaturally just to fit. Its head tilted, slowly, until it hung almost upside down, as though peering directly at me. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its weight, its hunger. I froze. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked. My grandmother's warning roared in my head, don't let them hear your name. The thing reached out, a long, blackened hand stretching toward my chest. And then, just as it brushed against me, something sharp rang out. A bell. Not from my room. From outside. It was a tiny sound, like a handbell, but the moment it rang, the shadow reeled back. Its form stuttered, breaking apart like smoke, until it dissolved into nothing. I gasped for air, my chest aching. The next morning, I found out my grandmother had rung the small brass bell she kept by her bed. She said the hollow ones hated iron, brass, and bells in particular. They don't like the sound of something that calls the living together, she explained. I should have felt safer. But instead, I realized something terrifying. They hadn't just stayed in the cemetery. They'd followed me home. The research. Sleep was impossible after that. I started digging into the town's history, desperate to find answers. At the library, I scoured old records, journals, and folklore collections. Most of it was whispers, stories no one admitted to believing but everyone knew. One name kept appearing, the Veil Fog. Apparently, every few decades, the fog would roll in heavier than usual, and sightings would spike. Tall, crooked shadows, humming in the night, pressing on people's chests while they slept. The accounts were fragmented, but consistent. The oldest story I found dated back to the late 1800s. A diary entry from a man who claimed the creatures had taken his brother after he called out to him in the cemetery one foggy night. The last line was scrawled in panic, he turned when I said his name. He turned, but it wasn't him anymore. I wanted to stop reading. I wanted to walk away, pretend none of this was real. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew the truth, those things weren't going away. They had marked me somehow. And I wasn't the only one. The neighbor. One night, I heard screaming outside. When I ran to the window, I saw my neighbor, Mr. Whitaker, stumbling in the street. He was an older man, lived alone since his wife passed. He was clutching his ears, shouting, "Stop it. Stop the humming. I bolted outside to help him, but when I reached him, his eyes were wild, unfocused. He grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin, and whispered. "They want names. Don't give them yours." Before I could ask what he meant, he collapsed. He died that night. The coroner said it was a heart attack. But I knew better. The return. I stopped leaving my window open. I slept with lights on, a brass bell by my side, and salt scattered along the sill. For a while, it worked. The humming stayed distant, muffled, like it couldn't cross the barrier. But last week, the fog came back. It rolled thick over the town, swallowing every streetlight. From my room, I could barely see across the yard. And then I heard it. Not the hum. My name. Whispered from the dark. I froze, every muscle locking tight. They weren't supposed to know my name. I'd never spoken it that night. I'd never given it away. But they whispered it again. Louder. Clearer. Your name. And the humming followed. The grave. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know how they learned my name. I went back to the cemetery at dawn, when the fog finally lifted. The place was quiet, almost peaceful. But near the back, where I'd first seen them, I found something new. A gravestone I didn't remember. Old, weathered, half buried under moss. My blood ran cold when I brushed the dirt away. It had my name on it. Same spelling. Same year of birth. No date of death. I stumbled back, my breath ragged. Someone had carved it there, long before I was born. And now the hollow ones had connected it to me. The choice. My grandmother says there's only one way to break the tie: I have to bury the stone. Deep, far from the cemetery, somewhere the fog can't reach. But she also warned me, disturbing it might draw them closer than ever. The problem is, I'm running out of time. The humming doesn't just come at night anymore. I hear it in the daylight now, faint but constant, like a second heartbeat under my own. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I swear my reflection tilts its head, just slightly, like it's listening to something I can't hear. And last night, I heard another whisper. Not my name this time. But my grandmother's. To be continued. Burying the gravestone didn't set me free. I couldn't ignore it anymore. That gravestone with my name carved into it, sitting there in the cemetery, waiting for me like a prophecy, was a curse. Every night since I found it, the humming had grown louder, the whispers clearer. And now, it wasn't just my name. They whispered my grandmother's. My best friends. Even the mailman's. Anyone I'd spoken to recently, as if the hollow ones were sifting through my life, pulling names out like threads. Grandma said I had to bury the stone, deep and far away, somewhere it couldn't bind me anymore. I didn't want to, but the humming was breaking me. So one night, I took a shovel and went back. Digging in the dark. The fog was thick again, and the cemetery gate groaned as if warning me to stay out. I moved fast, heart hammering, the shovel cold and heavy in my hands. When I reached the gravestone, I almost expected it to be gone, like it had never existed. But no. It was still there. My name staring back at me, carved into the cracked marble. I dug until my hands blistered, until the dirt caked my clothes. Every strike of the shovel echoed too loud in the fog. I kept glancing around, expecting to see those crooked figures weaving between the stones. When the hole was deep enough, I wrapped the gravestone in an old sheet and heaved it inside. The ground seemed to resist, as if pushing it back up. But I forced the soil over it, packed it down, and whispered every prayer I could remember. The moment I finished, the humming stopped. Not faded. Not distant. Just silence. For the first time in months, I slept. The return of the hum. It lasted 3 nights. On the 4th, I woke to a scratching sound at my window. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw a shadow outside. Too tall, bent at an impossible angle, its head pressed against the glass. It didn't hum this time. It whispered. "We know where you buried it." I screamed, grabbed the brass bell, and rang it until my arm ached. The shadow peeled away from the window, dissolving into fog. But the silence didn't comfort me anymore. Because they had learned something new. They weren't bound to the cemetery anymore. They could follow the dig site. The next day, I went back to where I had buried the gravestone. My stomach dropped the second I saw it. The dirt was disturbed. The ground ripped open, claw marks in the soil as if something had dug its way out. The stone was gone. I don't know how they did it. Maybe the hollow ones carried it out themselves. Maybe it never wanted to stay buried. But now the tie between us wasn't broken. It was stronger. My friend's disappearance. I tried to warn people. I told my best friend, Aaron, everything. I expected him to laugh, to call me insane. But he didn't. He listened quietly, his face pale, and admitted something. He'd been hearing the hum too. That night, he stayed over at my house. We thought maybe if we weren't alone, we could fight it. Around 2:30 a.m., the fog seeped in under the doorframes, curling along the floor like smoke. The humming filled the room. Louder than ever. We rang the bells, scattered salt, did everything Grandma had taught me. But then, they spoke. Not my name. Not Grandma's. Aaron's. He froze, eyes wide, lips trembling. "How do they know my name?" he whispered. The shadows pressed against the walls, stretching long, crooked arms toward him. The brass bell shook in his hand, but it didn't help. The humming rose higher, vibrating so hard the glass of the window cracked. And then, he was gone. One blink, and the shadows folded over him. The next, the room was empty. His bell clattered to the floor, ringing once before going silent. I searched the entire house, screaming his name, but he wasn't there. It was like they had pulled him out of existence. The journal. After Aaron disappeared, I was desperate. I begged my grandmother for more answers. She told me about a man named Elias who had written a journal over a century ago. According to town legend, he had survived longer with the hollow ones than anyone else. His descendants still lived here, and one of them kept the journal hidden. It took weeks of begging and trading favors, but I finally got my hands on it. Most of it was rambling, scratched words about shadows, names, and silence. But one passage stood out. They do not just feed on names. They feed on the memory of those names. Each soul they take, they erase. The world forgets them, and only the marked remember. My hands shook as I read. That's why no one else seemed to notice Aaron was gone. His apartment was empty, his number disconnected. His parents swore they never had a son. I was the only one who remembered him. Because I was marked too. The forest. The journal said there was one place where the hollow ones were weakest, the heart of the forest behind the cemetery. A clearing where the trees grew in a perfect circle, and no fog could linger. I had to try. The forest was thick and silent, the kind of silence that eats every sound you make. I walked for hours until I found it, a perfect ring of trees, their branches arched overhead like a cage. Inside the circle, the ground was bare, no grass, no weeds. Just dirt. I stepped inside, and the humming vanished. My chest felt lighter for the first time in months. But carved into the dirt were dozens of names. Scratched by hand, hundreds of them, overlapping in frantic scrawls. Some were faded, some fresh. And among them, I saw Aaron's. And mine. The truth. It hit me then, the hollow ones didn't just hunt. They collected. Every name written in that clearing was someone they had marked, someone they had fed on. Some of those names probably belonged to people the town had long forgotten. People who had never existed, as far as the rest of the world was concerned. And now my name was there, waiting. I fell to my knees, desperate, clawing at the dirt to erase it. But no matter how hard I scraped, the letters burned back into place. The soil itself seemed branded. That's when I heard the voices again. Dozens, hundreds, whispering at once. My name, Aaron's, Grandma's, every name I'd ever heard them speak. The sound built and built until the trees shook, until my bones felt like they were vibrating apart. I ran. The last warning. I don't know how much longer I have. The journal says once your name is written in the clearing, it's only a matter of time. The hollow ones circle closer, until the world forgets you too. I can already feel it happening. My friends don't return my calls. My boss looked confused when I came to work, as if he'd never seen me before. Even Grandma slipped sometimes, calling me, the boy, instead of my name. I'm disappearing. And last night, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see myself. I saw a tall, crooked figure. Tilting its head. Humming. To be continued.